my name is Sam Levitt, and welcome back to another Private Pilot Ground School review episode. And today, we are going to talk about pattern entries into uncontrolled airports. So to review once again, we've got the upwind leg, we've got the crosswind leg, the downwind leg, and then the base leg. And we use these to stay in the pattern, right? But how do we get into the pattern, right? If we're not starting from the ground where we just can take off and stay in the pattern, how do we get there, right? Well, we know that with Purdue University Airport, when we're flying the pattern, tower is going to tell us, right? They're going to say, go ahead and, if we're coming from the south, they're going to say, go ahead and make left traffic for runway 23. And we know that's what that procedure would look like. Or if we're coming from the north, make right traffic 23. Or right traffic 28, right? We know that tower makes it so easy for us with pattern entries. But what do we do at uncontrolled airports when tower isn't telling us to? Well, for the most part, all the time, your patterns are going to be to the left, unless tower tells you to make a right pattern, or the airport sectional or the airport flight directory tells you to make a right pattern. So let's go ahead and let's look at White County for an example of how to enter the pattern. The first thing we're going to do is set up the pattern. Let's say the winds are favoring runway 18. And I'll go ahead and draw the winds right here to show which direction they're going. So the first thing we're going to do right off the bat is set up our pattern. Well, we know if the winds are favoring runway 18, we'll set up our pattern, right? Our upwind, our crosswind, our downwind, because we're going with the wind here, and we turn base and final. Well, if we start on the ground, we start at the ground, and we go and we taxi runway 18, we know that if we're staying in the pattern, it's just going to be nice and easy, like we said. But what do we do if our aircraft is starting from another area, right? From another airport. We're arriving the area. So I'm going to go ahead and set up 3 examples. If we have a plane coming from the northwest, if we have a plane coming from the northeast, the southwest, or southeast, right? How do we enter the pattern? How do we get into our pattern? How does that happen? Well, the first thing we're going to do at an uncontrolled airport is make that first call. And we make that first call when we are 10 miles out. When we are 10 nautical miles out is when I want you to make that first call. Now, it's imperative to know that according to the FAA, straight out of the Aeronautical Information Manual and Advisory Circular 90-66 Charlie, the FAA does not regulate traffic pattern entry, only traffic pattern flow. And so, let's talk about that flow. Let's talk about the proper way to enter the pattern. So, like I said, 10 nautical miles out, that first call is going to be made. When you're flying into the airport and you see 10 nautical miles out on that GPS, make that first call. Let them know you're 10 nautical miles out to the north or the south or the west. And then do the exact same thing when you are 5 nautical miles out. You're going to let the traffic area know that you're inbound. And you also are going to let them know where you're coming from, right? At an uncontrolled airport, to review, there's no tower. There is a common traffic advisory frequency in which you report your own position. It's kind of like one big conference call of the area. Everyone jumps in and they all get to talk and they all listen to each other and they got to figure out where each other are. And because there's no one controlling the area, it's your job as a pilot in command of the aircraft to listen and build that situational awareness of where everybody else is. Because the number one thing you cannot do that the FAA strictly discourages is to make this call. And I quote, "Any traffic in the area, please advise." That is not recognized as a self-announcing position call. That is not recognized by the FAA and should not be used under any condition. You should never get onto the common traffic advisory frequency when you're 10 miles out and say, "Hey, who's here?" Right? That will just create congestion. So let's start with this bottom right plane over here. This plane is going to be the easiest entry because all this guy has to do is fly directly to the midfield of the downwind and make that 45-degree turn from the downwind and just enter into the left downwind, right? So to review, this pilot coming from the southeast has to just fly to the left downwind and enter, right? Because as he's flying in this way, he's looking to the left and he's looking to the right and he's scanning the different sections of the pattern. He's looking for traffic there. He's got a great view and a great visibility of the traffic in the pattern. And if there is someone in there and he won't be able to squeeze himself in, well, he can just make a 360. Or he can just fly straight in. Or he can just extend where he makes that entrance to the downwind. Because when you're coming from here, all you got to do is make left traffic. Because what is standard patterns? To the left. Now with this guy, there's two options. The best option would be to fly this way and then join that downwind, right? Because here, when he's right here, he's able to once again view the whole left downwind of the pattern. He's able to have that perspective and see and visualize if there's any other traffic, right? It's your job when you're entering the pattern to scan for traffic. Or another thing he can do if there's no one in the pattern is go direct to enter left base. Now that is not recommended because number one, we know at a Class Gulf airport, at an uncontrolled airport, you don't need to have radios. So there could always be someone in the pattern who just is free flying and not talking. You don't have to have ADS-B, so you might not see them on your radar or ForeFlight or your GPS, whatever you use. And so if you enter straight and left base, it is at your own risk and you're putting it at the risk of others because if there's someone in the pattern coming this way, you'll put yourself on a collision course. So it's best advised to go ahead and enter the left pattern this way. But under the very rare circumstances that it's an empty pattern, entering direct left base is an acceptable way to the left traffic pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and draw out here the entrance to the 45-degree downwind as well as if he wants to go direct to left base. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these guys here for a minute because these two on the right side are the easiest. Well, let's go ahead and let's talk about these two planes over here, right? How do these guys get to the left pattern? Clearly they're on the other side and we know we have to make left turns. How are we going to get in? Well, the traffic pattern altitude at White County is about 1,700 feet. So I'm going to go ahead and write that in here for us. We know that the elevation for White County is around 700 feet. And we know that the traffic pattern altitude is about 1,700 feet. So how are these guys over here going to get into the traffic pattern? The first thing as always is to report when you're 10 nautical miles out and then 5 nautical miles out. And what you're going to do, we'll start with this plane over here. You're going to fly directly to the midfield. You're going to fly to the middle of the field. And what you're going to do is you are going to put yourself 500 feet above the traffic pattern altitude. Well, 500 feet above midfield will put you right at 2,200. So you're going to cross midfield at 2,200 feet right here, right? So what you're going to do is you're crossing the midfield there at 2,200 feet, and then where do we go from here? Well, we know we need to enter left traffic. Now you'll see in a lot of instances, people will cross over midfield and just join that left downwind. Well, if you're doing that, what are you risking? Let's say there's someone coming in this way on the downwind. There's someone else in the traffic pattern coming in on the downwind at the traffic pattern altitude. Well, if you have someone crossing over midfield and coming this way, what do you think is going to happen when they join right there? Yeah, no bueno. That can give a mid-air collision, and that's what we are trying to avoid. So what we're going to do is we're going to cross over midfield, and then we're just going to fly straight out at your discretion, right? It's best to go at least 1.5 miles, 2 miles out, right? That seems like a lot, but you want to give yourself an adequate amount of spacing so you can, as you overfly the downwind, look to your left and look to your right, because you're scanning the downwind and you're also scanning the traffic pattern, making sure that there's no one else in there. So after you cross over the pattern and over that left downwind right here, what you're going to do is you're going to do what we call a teardrop entry. And that looks like this, right? It's one big circle all the way around, and you join that left downwind. Now this is what we call a teardrop entry. Your teardrop entry is a descending, right turning 500-foot turn. So it is right here that we start our descent. Recall, what altitude were we at? Well, we were at 2,200 feet. And what we're doing is we're starting that descent and we're turning to then join the pattern. And by the time we get right here, we're going to be at a pattern altitude of 1,700 feet. Now, why are we making that a right descending turn? Let's think about it. We're crossing over the midfield. We're crossing over that downwind. We start turning to the right and we lower our nose, correct? And as we come along, look here. We're able to scan to the right and left the traffic pattern. We're able to scan that downwind. We're looking to the right, we're looking to the left, we're looking in front of us, we're looking at the upwind. That teardrop entry allows us to have a great visual at the traffic pattern. So if we come in with that teardrop entry, we can then rejoin that left downwind. So once again, following this aircraft 10 nautical miles out, you'll report 10 nautical miles out southwest, and then you'll report 5 nautical miles out southwest, and then you'll report crossing over midfield, 500 feet above the pattern, going to make a right teardrop for a left downwind runway 18. We're crossing over our left downwind right here, and then we're still extending all the way out to make a nice, smooth right teardrop entry into the left pattern. And with that, that gives us two things. One, we're not interfering with someone already in the pattern, right? If someone's in here, we're not going to collide with them, because when we overfly, it's allowing us to once again visually clear the pattern. Now that we have addressed the teardrop entry, if we're looking at this plane in the top left, it's the same thing. Fly direct midfield, overfly the field, go and overfly the downwind, enter that right teardrop for left downwind runway 18 at White County. So we've covered already what to do if you're entering the pattern from the northeast or the northwest, southwest, and southeast. The last way you can enter the pattern is straight in. Now, why don't I recommend this again? Because if you're coming to land straight in and there's 4 guys in the pattern, number one, that is a huge hazard, because you're disrupting the pattern flow that's already been established by the other planes in there. And 2, you're risking the chance of a mid-air collision. Why try and squeeze yourself into a pattern if there's 1, 2, 3, 4 planes already in the pattern and they're coming in, and then you try and squeeze yourself in between them, right? That is causing a mid-air collision. That is not what you want to have. So if you're coming in, I highly recommend not to do a straight-in final. Not just myself, but the FAA discourages VFR straight-in approaches to landings due to increased risk of mid-air collision because of this reasoning. So the best thing you can do is you can fly to this side of the pattern and then cross over midfield, right? Because 1, you're steering clear of all the other traffic in the pattern, and 2, we have a great procedure for how to cross over midfield, correct? We know that when we cross over midfield, it's going to be 500 feet above the traffic pattern altitude, right? We're going to be at around 2,200 here at White County. We're going to cross over the downwind, scan all the traffic, and enter that left downwind for the left traffic pattern into White County. Like I said already, something to be aware of is other traffic in the pattern without radios, which once again is why I advise using the teardrop entry, because you're able to scan for traffic. Even if there's no one on your GPS, your ForeFlight, your Sentry, whatever you use to see traffic, or if there's someone that isn't on radios, right? There's always a chance of having no radio, no ADS-B aircraft. Another big thing is to avoid unnecessary communications, right? Avoid using those unnecessary communications. Keep your communications brief. Keep them clear. Let them know where you're entering from. Let them know your entrances. Do not ask other people what they are doing. Do not ask other people to do things either, right? I, the other day, was flying along and I had another aircraft overfly the field at 7,000 feet and told the traffic area that he was steep spiraling down to enter the left downwind, and he asked me to move out of the way for him. And that is something that you do not want to do in aviation, especially at uncontrolled airports, because that is not how you properly enter the pattern, number one. And number two, there's no need to congest traffic, and there's no need to congest your radio calls like that, right? We want to keep everything brief, concise, and clear. And to conclude, those are the proper pattern entries into an uncontrolled airport, right? We've got the crossing over the midfield, we've got the joining the left downwind, we've got flying the proper left traffic pattern, unless the sectional tells you to do otherwise, or unless air traffic control tells you to do otherwise. But in that case, when there's air traffic control, they are helping you on your entries, right? They're telling you, make a left downwind, cross over midfield. They're telling you to join the right base for a certain runway. But at an uncontrolled airport like White County, it is very important you follow these pattern entry procedures, you learn them, you ask an instructor if you're unclear, because it is a huge hazard and a common misconception nowadays with pilots forgetting the proper procedures to enter the traffic pattern. So once again, thank you so much for joining me with another Private Pilot Ground School episode. Feel free to ask me any questions, consult your own instructor, and if you want to start flight lessons here in West Lafayette, Indiana, Purdue Aviation LLC is a place for you. Thank you.